So good afternoon y bienvenidos. And welcome and thank you all for joining us on this historic day as we honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, in one of his final sermons, The Drum Major Instinct, Dr. King explained the importance of service to others, elaborating that the path to greatness is through service. So in his service, he says, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. So today and every day, I hope we continue to honor Dr. King by heeding his call to service. So on behalf of the HSC Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and our renowned partners, the Albuquerque NAACP and the New Mexico Martin Luther King Jr. State Commission, we are so very pleased to convene such a poignant and significant discussion on this historical day. So it's now my pleasure to be able to introduce our esteemed speakers, trusted, fearless, inspirational leaders from our communities. And following my introductions, each of our speakers today will take a moment to offer opening comments before we begin our topics for the day. So Dr. Harold Bailey, president of the Albuquerque NAACP, was raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and attended UNM, where he received his Bachelor of Sciences in Education, a Master of Arts degree in Special Education, and his Doctorate of Philosophy in American Studies with an emphasis on education administration. Dr. Bailey is the former Executive Director of the New Mexico Office of African American Affairs, the past Director of UNM's African American Studies Program, and past member of the New Mexico Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. He was formerly president of the NAACP for the state and a former special education teacher for our Albuquerque public school systems. Dr. Bailey is a firm believer that it will take a collective strategy developed in partnership with other groups to effectively address disparities and inequalities that adversely affect all of us. Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Miss Pamela Herndon, I was saying Dr. Herndon there, is the first vice president of the Albuquerque NAACP. She also serves as the president and CEO of the KW Law Center for Social Justice and Change. And this is a nonprofit law center that's focused on providing access to justice for low and medium income individuals with an emphasis on advocating for the rights of women, children, and families with children. She has been in the Albuquerque area now for 37 years, a graduate from Howard University School of Business and University Texas School of Law. She's a 2019 to 2021 W.K. Kellogg Fellow and serves as the Secretary of the Board of Directors of the U.S. Eagle Federal Credit Union. She was elected to serve as on a three-year term as a member of the Council of the American Bar Association's Civil Rights and Social Justice section, and has also been appointed as a commissioner to the American Bar Association's Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. Ms. Herndon also serves as the state chair of the American Association of University Women, where she really leads efforts on social justice issues such as fair pay, paid sick leave, and enhanced educational programs for students in pre-K through grade 12. Welcome here, Ms. Herndon. And then Mr. Leonard Waits is the Executive Director of the New Mexico Martin Luther King Jr. State Commission. Mr. Waits is a graduate of the University of Phoenix with his Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration. He is also a native of Albuquerque and graduated from Manzano High School. He's a member of both the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho chapters of the NAACP and active in the community, serving on the Police Oversight Task Force and past chairman of the Police Oversight Board. Mr. Waits has committed his life to bettering our community by focusing on the works and ideals of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., especially on this anniversary of his assassination coming up. Mr. Waits said, Dr. King had a vision for our nation, that all men and women are created equal, and it can only be achieved by the individual and collective courage of us all together. help make Dr. King's dream a reality as we work to end racism and injustice through nonviolence and community leadership. Thank you, Mr. Waits. So I will now turn it over to our three speakers to offer their opening comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess I'll start off. First of all, thank you very much. I'd like to just kind of clear up a couple of things about the NAACP as a whole. Some people think it's a Black organization. It is not. When the organization was founded in 1909, there were white people at the table. The Albuquerque branch has a long, rich history of fighting for civil rights here in New Mexico. The branch received its official charter January 5th, 1915. So the branch is 106 years old, and I'm proud to be the president. There's a lot of people who made things happen for a lot of people, most certainly me. And before we continue, I'd like to pay my respects to the state president of the NAACP, Joseph Cotton from Hobbs, New Mexico. Thank you.
So I'll go next. So when I was introduced today, I was introduced as being the CEO of KWH, a law center for social justice and change. And what I want you to know about that law center is that it was named after my mother. And my mother was a woman who grew up in Texas with lots and lots of burdens on her back. So she was a teacher, and she had attained her master's degree. But even with a master's degree, she was still finding, in order to make ends meet in our family, she had to clean the houses of people. And so I'm going, Mom, you have a master's degree. Why is that happening? She said, sometimes you do what you have to do to make things happen. So all of the struggles that she came up with, all of the fight that she had was far before the time that we are seeing now. So I said, at some point in time in my life, I was going to do something in her honor. And there we have the KWH Law Center for Social Justice and Change.
I guess it's my turn now. First of all, thank you for having me today. It is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here with such distinguished guests. Dr. Bailey and I go back a long, long way. We both grew up here in Albuquerque back in 1970. I think it was Dr. Bailey, about 74, 75 timeframe. We marched, we had a sit-in at the University of New Mexico. Both him and I and a few other people, we were boycotting UNM for not allowing a Black baseball player to compete on the baseball team. So we have a lot of history. We've been together for such a long time. I feel honored and a pleasure to be here today with you all, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much to each of our speakers for those really very touching opening remarks and informative for us. The next part of going into our discussion for today, I just want to give you all the format for that. We will address each topic, and as we do topic by topic, each of our three speakers will speak to that topic. And if we have a little bit of time, we'll answer a few of the questions that might come up then. So please feel free to keep populating your questions throughout. Then we'll move to the next topic and have the three speak to that topic and so on to the third. And then we will certainly make sure and we have set time so that we have question and answers at that point. So I will turn it over as we begin our first topic of civil rights in the 21st century.
As we
Ms.
look
Herndon, would you like to begin?
Yes. As we look at civil rights in the 21st century, the question is always asked, well, how is civil rights going to be different now in the 21st century than it was in the 20th century? Well, let me just give you a couple of examples. During the 20th century, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was leading the civil rights era, they were fighting for healthcare. They were fighting for homelessness. They were fighting for jobs. They were fighting against discrimination, and they were fighting against racism. So here we are in the 21st century, And I said, okay, what are we fighting for? Well, it's healthcare, it's homelessness, against homelessness. We're fighting for jobs, we're fighting for against discrimination, and we're fighting against racial disparities. So what do we do next? So what we need to do next is look at the systems that are in place and how do we make a change. One of the changes that I always tell people to look at is you start by looking at what is happening each and every year with our legislative session. Right now, as we begin this process, our legislative session is in place. And what is on the table? There are two major areas of items that are on the table. And let me tell you how they affect people. One is something called a piece of legislation called the Crown Act, giving people of color, African American, Native American, Hispanic Americans, any person at all, the right to go and wear the hairstyles that they want. If they want it in a bun and tied up, if they want to wear dreadlocks, they can, but that you don't punish them and you don't cut their hair and you don't discriminate against them because they have chosen something which is a cultural heritage to them. One other item that I want you to look at in the 21st century that we need to fight against as we're looking at homelessness and jobs and we're looking at discrimination. New Mexico is one of the few states in the entire country that does not have a cap on interest rates at all. There's no usury in this state. So I bring that to your attention because 2 years ago, the legislature said, okay, we're gonna fix that. We're gonna put a cap of 175% on small loans, not more than $5,000. This year they're saying, well, we'll cap it at 36%. Well, you know, if we're in a state that is described as one of the poorest states in the union, why would we have a 36% interest on anything? I'm saying that our role in the 21st century is to fight for things that will make equality and equity in our state the name of the game. So you tell the legislature, it's not 36%, it's 18%, the same as offered for credit unions across the state. Create that equality for every single person. When one rises, we all rise up. So that's our word for today, looking at the 21st century.
Okay, I would kind of like to add a couple.
Thank you, Ms. Herndon. All right, Dr. Bailey.
Yeah, I would like to kind of add a couple of things. I think that the things that we're dealing with in the 21st century, we have to kind of go back in time. For an example, being a Black man in New Mexico and America, you know, we have to deal with the institution of slavery. You know, what frame of mind was America in during that time? Black people were brought to this country not to enjoy the fruits and benefits, but to establish a free labor force. So one has to analyze the attitude that's been perpetuated throughout society. You know, you have the institution of slavery, you have the Jim Crow laws, you know, we have to fight for civil rights, the Voting Rights Act. So in the 21st century, we still have a Jim Crow attitude that keeps us from treating people with respect in all facets of life. So I want to kind of concentrate on the institutional and societal racism that, you know, they adversely affect all of us. So that's happening in the 21st century. As we say back in the day, you know, the struggle continues.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Mine is a little bit more centered around Dr. King's 6 principles of nonviolence. I think at the 20th century, he understood and he laid the foundation that we utilize today on equal rights, voting rights, fair trial, governmental service, and public education. Those things were apparent in the 20th century. They are apparent today. Those are important things that we need to have, and we need to continue our fight for as far as civil rights. I agree with everything that Dr. Bailey and Ms. Herndon said. Actually, he took some of my things, but again, Dr. King's 6 principle of nonviolence was the foundation for everything that we're doing in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, for those wonderful and really inspiring comments and informational. But I think we definitely have some time for questions right now, and then we can move to our next topic. But if anybody would either like to raise their hands through our Zoom, or please open it up in the chat, we'd like to go ahead and take a couple of these comments or questions now. I think there is one question, just more specifically, Ms. Herndon, who is sponsoring the Crown Act right now in the session?
So Representative Cheryl Williams Stapleton is a part of that group. There are a number of senators and House of Representative members who are still signing on to it. So, but she is taking the lead on that.
Okay, thank you. Molly Faulkner, would you like to share your thoughts with the group and speak to us on your comment?
On my comment, I'm sorry.
Yes, I think, did you have something in the chat here?
Oh,
Molly?
it's Molly Faulkner Hussein. There's two Molly
Yes.
Faulkners here.
Oh, goodness. I have too many screens that I'd have to keep going through, so thank you.
Hi, I am acquainted with some of the speakers, and I'm I guess you would call a newcomer, but one of the things I noticed, especially coming from the East Coast, is that it's kind of difficult to negotiate or to find how we are actively developing leadership, particularly our younger leadership, and mentoring them towards doing activism and bringing them forward that they can be capable and ready to take over some of the leadership positions of some of our guests in this conference, because the future is ahead of us. And I think that in my viewpoint is that we have to learn to be more open and more collaborative in seeking out the partnerships that we need in unconventional ways, because I have found it to be sort of like a little closed network system that can deter a lot of people. So I was wondering if there was any opinion or advice on what we could actively do to bring each other forward in development.
Ms. Faulkner, I can answer that. The Martin Luther King Commission, we host a youth conference each year, and I've been here since 2016, and each year we host a youth conference, and we it's a 2-day conference, and we put them in the hotel and feed them 3 meals a day. But the top subject matter is policing, budgeting, a lot of different things that's going to help them in the future. It's we call it Martin Luther King Youth Ambassador Program, or the Youth Leadership Program. So we do have that in my office. We offer that each year, other than this year because of the pandemic. But there is a program in place for that.
Mm-hmm. How does that translate into opportunities, like job opportunities or intern opportunities?
Well, they have, from my office, we have information that leads to jobs, such as the city, different avenues that the youth program or the people in our office will allow them to participate in. So everything comes through the office. So the opportunity is there, for that.
If I can make one comment just in response to that, I think that was a good point. We have to embrace young people because it's their time. Our time is not over, but we have to embrace young people because, like you say, the future is now for them. And so when we organize things, we have to make sure we bring them to the table. For an example, Black Lives Matter or other youth groups, we have to make sure that we do not stand in their way. And a lot of times we, let's just say who are over 39, we may have this attitude that our time should be forever. But, as far as my position as a president of the Albuquerque NAACP, I welcome young people because that passion is as far as what we need to carry this struggle to the next level.
Then I will close out this conversation by suggesting to you, or telling you rather, that the young people are also reaching out to us. So just today, we received a message from a young woman at Sue Cleveland High School. And she said, I want to talk to you all. I want to talk to the NAACP. I want to talk to the leaders in our city about how we become leaders. And we want to set up those conversations. And so we're in the process of having those conversations right now. And I can tell you for the last 5 years, I have absolutely reached out and had individuals working with me as interns to learn the law, and so that they can understand how it helps and how it can help our communities. And then I want to share with you one other thing to look at. If you look at this summer when there were the protests against the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all others, who was leading those protests? It was Black Lives Matter, supported by the old regime of the NAACP and the SCLC. So that description that you are looking for is absolutely happening right now. So don't think that it isn't occurring, because there is always a way that's being made to make sure that we have leaders coming up and always somebody to take the place and move our communities forward.
And I also want to thank Pamela Herndon for supporting our youth conference every year. She's been an advocate for what we do, and I want to thank you for that, Pam.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I just think that we need to toot our horn a little bit louder, so we that know can remember, and we that don't know can be informed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that really excellent question, Ms. Faulkner. And you saw how much interest that generated. And like you said, we need to be able to share that information as well. And like how you said, toot that horn and just continue to engage, because I know each of these leaders here today has certainly embraced and has included and reached out to our youth and had them as part of the different events and work that they do. So thank you for that. We will move to our next topic of discussion, institutional and systemic racism. Who would like to start us off?
Mine is pretty brief, and I'm sure that the other people have more to say about it, but to me, institutional racism and systemic racism, to me, are the same thing. Both are a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within our society or an organization. Both lead to issues such as discrimination and the criminal justice, in housing, education, among other things. And it's important that we continue to fight against systemic racism or those type of things, so it's very important. And I, as working on the Oversight Commission here in Albuquerque, we saw a lot of that, especially in the criminal justice system, police brutality and different things like that. So we have to continue to fight against the institutional racism and systemic racism that's happening around our city today.
So I'll go next, and thank you very much. One of the things that I look at is I go back and I look at the Constitution as it existed in 1787. And if you look at Article 1, Section 2 of that Constitution when it was written, it talked about how we were going to allocate and apportion and determine the number of members who would be in the House of Representatives. And so it went back and forth, and they just couldn't make a decision. So finally, they decided, in order to bring the South on board, because that's where the division was occurring, because they had so many more slaves in their state than they did in the northern parts and the west and the eastern part of our country. So the decision was made that slaves, Black people, would be counted as 3/5 of a person instead of a whole person. And so there we began this whole concept of systemic racism. But eventually that was changed because we saw the 13th Amendment come along, which abolished slavery. We saw the 14th Amendment that came along that gave people equal protection of rights. And then we came up next with respect to making sure that individuals, particularly Black men, had the right to vote. So I will just tell you, as we look at systemic racism, what we are trying to do is make sure that our children are not receiving the highest rate of disciplinary actions in our school system when they only make up 3% of the school system, that banks are not redlining us so that we cannot receive access to housing and other areas, and that the courts of law will absolutely apply the law equally and not make a determination on the color of your skin.
Okay, just a couple of things to add to that. Institutional and societal racism, we all know what they're all about. But the key thing is, what are we going to do about it? I think that we have to formulate coalitions and partnerships, alliances amongst other groups to correctly identify the situation and then address it, come up with some possible solutions. Going through, my time on the planet, I realized that it's not always going to be a Black hand reaching out to help me. So, I'm comfortable in my skin as a Black person. So I'm saying it's going to take different groups to be comfortable, but at the same time, be open enough to work with others who don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? Institutional and societal racism adversely affect all of us. So it's going to take a solution framed by all of us. But at the same time, before we do that, we're going to have to self-check. We have to see what our individual biases are before we ask someone else to kind of change theirs. So we know what institution and society or systemic racism, what they're all about. But the key thing is, how can we develop a collective strategy to address these ills that are present in our society, in particular the 21st century. And someone had mentioned that, we have to save the planet, for our youth and our kids, grandkids. And the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it individually and collectively? So really, that's where we stand.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions as well. If anybody would like to speak out and ask a question or have comments at this time. And I'm going to just quickly check the chat here. Any questions or comments right now? I'm just trying to just quickly scan through our different screens. But please go ahead and speak if you'd like to at this point. Okay, let's go ahead and go into our next topic of discussion then, on the importance of nonviolent protest. Oh yes, does somebody have one here, Pamela, do you see?
Yes, Nancy Shane has a question.
Wonderful, Nancy.
But Nancy, you have to unmute so we can hear you.
I think you're muted.
I really do, sorry, thank you. And I think there are some more that are coming up in chat too. It just takes a little while to type those in. But so when it comes to institutionalized racism, I feel like oftentimes things they're not obvious, but it also doesn't take very much looking at it. It's just like right under the surface to uncover what the problem is, because it's, it seems to me that it's not written like black versus white rules. It's written like it just affects different groups of people differently. And so it sort of looks fair, but it is not in practice. And I'm wondering how much, to me, it's a very slow process to sort of uncover all those things, even though they're just right under the surface, really. I'm just wondering if you could comment about that and what does it take to uncover those kinds of things? Thank you.
Well, I'll respond. It's that, first of all, is awareness. All of us are somewhat sophisticated thinkers. So if you see something that's wrong or out of place, or someone is being discriminated against, or there's a negative attitude being directed towards a certain group of people because they choose to live a different lifestyle, or I may choose to live a different lifestyle, or I'm a different, hey, then you're supposed to, step up to the plate and just deal with it. It has to be on a daily basis. It can't be like 2 or 3 times a year. Okay, Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. Okay, we're gonna get out, we're gonna have some Zoom meetings, and we're gonna, carry the flag, or we're gonna wait for Black History Month. It's a daily thing. If you're gonna bring about positive change, it's a lifestyle every day. You can go to the grocery store and run into racism. You're supposed to address it. I'm not saying everyone's supposed to be Superman, Superwoman, but there are a couple of people who might want to be Mighty Mouse. It's like eating an elephant. You have to eat it a bite at a time. So if we can just do little things, someone else is going to see you doing a little thing that's going to influence them to do a little thing or a big thing. So I think that's how we should do it collectively.
So I can offer some additional an additional suggestion. Yesterday was the National Day of Healing that was sponsored by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and as a part of, and I am a W.K. Kellogg Fellow. And at the end of that presentation, one of the things that we did was we went into small groups to just talk about the exact question that you just raised. What could we do about it? So the 2 white women who sat in the small group session with me talked about, well, I have white privilege and I can use my white privilege. And I said, if you really felt that great about utilizing your white privilege to eliminate some of the systemic racism, you don't have to tell me you're using your white privilege. All you have to do is let me see you hire some people. Let me see you pass some laws that are going to make a difference. Let me see you make the changes that need to come. Don't tell me every day, well, I have my white privilege and I'll move it to the left or the right. Just do it.
And I think, Pamela, you hit it right on the head. Action speaks louder than words. For so long, we've been outcasted or not having that privilege of getting the good jobs, getting loans at the bank, getting the right interest rates on cars and stuff like that because of that, and to me, those are systemic things. Those are things that happen every day, all the time. And I agree with you. Make a change. Do the right thing. Let's start hiring people to collect our people to collect garbage. At one time we had 5 or 6 Blacks on doing that. Let's hire people at the centers. At one time we had as many as 6 or 7 Black employees there running the centers. So I agree with you. Action speaks louder than words. Let's do those things to make the change. And that's very important in today's time.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions at this time or comments that would like to be shared?
I have
Not seen any other hands. Oh, yes, please, Nicole, please.
Hi, thank you all. So thank you, Brian, for sharing in the comment section the Crown Bill and the Black Education Act. I'm curious about what is the opposition to these things, if there are any particular state lobbies or just schools of thought that need to be overcome for these types of things to be enacted.
Nicole, you raised a really good question. What is the opposition? So the Crown Act has not been put forth as a legislative agenda item prior to this year. What we did see was incidences where we saw young Black men and Native American men having their hair cut or being criticized because of something that they wore that was culturally significant to them growing up and to the way in which they live. So we don't understand the reason why there would be any opposition for these types of changes occurring, other than what we're talking about right now, institutional racism existing and continuing on. And today during the presidential inauguration, one of the things that was focused on, I found to be interesting, was the song Amazing Grace. And so even the president, when he got up, the newly elected now president, Joe Biden, said, I like those words. He goes, I was blind, but now I see. And so that's what we need to help people understand. You were blinded by things that you didn't even realize were institutional racism, but we want you to help see those things and that you can see clearly. And now we are putting on those pieces of legislation, we're putting forth those changes so you can see them if you didn't see them before.
Well, let me add a couple of things to that in regards to the Crown Act. Why is there opposition? Well, there's that attitude out here that I'm speaking about. Some people may not like for an African woman to, or a Black woman to have cornrows or wear a headband, or a Black man wearing a certain hairdress, or a Muslim wearing a certain hairpiece. See, so there's that attitude that I'm saying that is still out here. So that's the opposition to construct.
I think
Did you get
we
that?
lost Dr. Bailey. No, Dr. Bailey, could you please repeat that?
Okay.
You froze for just a minute.
I was just
there.
saying the reason for the opposition for proper legislation is that people still have that negative attitude about certain people or certain dress. That if an African woman or a Black woman want to wear a certain hairdress, cornrows, or hairdress or whatever, or a Muslim woman, you know, they have an attitude towards that, like they should not be wearing it that way. Well, it's their choice. So it's these hidden negative attitudes that's in the legislature here and nationally that keeps us from framing proper legislation and passing certain legislation. So I think that's the reason for the Crown Act. And I think Senator Harold Polk Jr. Is sponsoring on the Senate side, and Dr. Representative Cheryl Williams-Stapleton on the representative side. So there's going to be a lot of support. But with regards to what we do, one has to check out negative attitudes. Why does one make that decision? Whether it's within the police department, or whether it be an institution of higher learning, whether it be in the medical school, whether it be in the law school. We have to just analyze, why does one or that person in charge make that type of decision? And a lot of times it's based on a negative attitude towards that particular group of people.
Thank you all. And I think there was another comment I wanted to share with everyone too, that Molly Faulkner Hussein said that we must learn to effectively inform to encourage. And then in regards to racism, hidden or otherwise, that it does take courage to embark on change. And perseverance is an acquired virtue, which is hard to mobilize. In reference to hiring, often a request must become a firm demand. So thank you for those comments, Ms. Faulkner Hussein. I'm just quickly scanning our audience here to see if there is any more comments or questions, and please speak out if you have one, and otherwise we will go on to our third topic of discussion.
Dr. Romero-Leggett.
Yes. State Auditor Colon.
Thank you for hosting. Great panel, great discussion, great information. Hopefully some of the links I put in the chat are helpful to people, but I do want to amplify the link I put in for standing together against racism. Dr. Bailey speaks so eloquently about collaboration and bringing people together to advance the agenda. And historically, the relationship between the Jewish community and the African-American community has been one of those collaborations that was not just in name only, it was extremely substantive. And it's been highlighted with the Jewish Film Festival this year, and Burke Against Racism and the Jewish Federation of New Mexico have unbelievably brought together the daughters of two great civil rights leaders, the daughter of Dr. King and the daughter of Rabbi Heschel. Dr. Susanna Heschel, and then Dr. Bernice King. They will be coming to us live stream. And so I just want to encourage everybody to take some time next Sunday on the 24th, I should say this Sunday, I guess, the 24th, and attend that Together Against Racism New Mexico event. It really bodes to be an incredibly powerful presentation.
Thank you, State Auditor Khan. And did you say you had shared that in the chat right now? The
Yes,
togetheragainstracism.org? Okay.
Exactly. And I'm not a sponsor, nor am I a beneficiary, because it is a free event, but I am a huge advocate for the event. I think it is going to be one of the best this year in observation and celebration of the legacy of Dr. King.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, our third topic of discussion today is the importance of nonviolent protests and demonstrations.
So,
Mr. Waits, would you like to start us off, or Pamela, are you going to?
No, I'll defer to Mr. Waits.
No, I'll defer to Pamela.
Looks like you, Ms. Herndon.
Share something with the group regarding nonviolence. What I did was I looked at what Dr. King said about nonviolence, and he says, first of all, I'm a man of the Bible. I am a religious man, and I don't believe in violence. And many of you put in the chat when we first began, hate should not beget hate. But it's love that should beget love. And those are the ways that we should be looking at things. So let me just give you a list of things that occurred in our American history. And it's just a moment. Look at the race riot of 1866, the Wilmington Insurrection Massacre of 1891, the East St. Louis race riot of 1917, the Chicago race riot of 1919. In Elaine, Arkansas, we saw the huge destruction there in 1919, the Tulsa Massacre of 1921, and the Rosewood, Florida massacre in 1923. So Dr. Martin Luther King said, if we were angry about each and every one of those, every time something happened, we would never heal. We would always be hurting. So he took a verse, a section from an abolitionist by the name of Minister Theodore Park. And he says, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. From what I can see, it always bends toward justice. So he says, even when you see those protests, you don't come back with violent protests, because eventually the moral arc of the universe will bend toward justice. And I believe that. And I just want to take one more personal privilege moment. During this time of looking out and reaching out, I have with me a young woman from St. Martin's Island, and so she's going to be interning with me as a fellow at KWH Law Center. Her name is Ravina Claudius, and she is on this section with us today because she wants to learn about us, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and how we are fighting against racism and systemic racism and all those things. And so today she's here to learn from us and from you. So I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to meet her.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Pamelia. Hello, everyone. I am visiting you here from the Dutch Caribbean on a 37 square miles. And there is no better day than today with the new President-elect Joe Biden and his new administration, and also getting to know about New Mexico, Albuquerque, your culture, and most importantly, Dr. Martin Luther King. So I have the privilege of working with Ms. Pamelia over the next 2 months, which I'll be learning all about your culture and all about institutional and systemic racism and all of the social problems that we are having to face us as young people, because I believe it's either Mr. Haley or Mr. White's mentioned that the youth is now. So how do we adapt to the 21st century and also fighting all of those social issues. So I'm really looking forward to it, and you will be seeing me in a lot more sessions. I will be coming with Miss Amelia, and I really look forward to hearing from a lot of you during my internship or during my fellowship at the KWH Law Center. Thank you so much, guys, for having me, and you'll be seeing me a lot more around. Thank you.
Welcome, Ravina Kalias. How wonderful. And thank you for sharing those remarks with us. And we're just looking forward to seeing you in more of these venues and learning from you. And thank you so much for being part of this as well. Welcome.
I would just like to make a few last comments in regards to nonviolence behavior. I respect Dr. Martin Luther King, but it's still that attitude. You notice that when Black Lives Matter or other groups, remember Black Lives Matter, it was not just like a Black thing. There were different types of groups in there, and that was the message that we need to send. So we need to make sure that when we march, we want to be nonviolent, but we have to talk to the other people. The militias, the white supremacists, those individuals who kind of embrace violence and purchase weapons and guns for specific reasons. I'm not saying that they're only people who can purchase weapons and guns, but I'm saying we have to kind of always embrace nonviolent demonstrations and protests. We have to make sure that law enforcement understand that, because what we saw last week or so, I don't think there were too many Black people up there trying to change the results of the election. So I'm saying if we can just kind of embrace what Dr. Martin Luther King says in regards to nonviolence, I support that. But sometimes we have to be a little bit more aggressive. I'm not saying violent, but we have to be aggressive to a point that we can articulate our concerns and we don't get these messages lost in the process or in the demonstration or the protest. Because a lot of times when violence erupts, we lose the message. So we have to make sure that the message is solid. That's the only thing I have to say at the end.
I agree with Dr. Bailey. Nonviolent protests has been a central part of our social and political change in American history. We've protested for a long time. Real change can and does happen when you protest or march. So it's very important that we continue that. It's very important that people see that we are aware. People see that we expect change and be a part of that change. So I agree. I don't have very much to say about that, but I'm a firm believer, as Dr. King stated, nonviolence is the way to approach this. So thank you.
Well, any questions or comments here? I know that Ms. Faulkner, you had another question in the chat. If you'd like to, Faulkner Hussein, if you would like to. Oh, you may be muted.
I just like to make a comment that, looking at what happened 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., it just highlights how when a white are engaged in violent and most likely illegal activity, it's so well tolerated, or it takes such a intense delayed reaction before someone stands up and say, oh, there must be consequences. But before people of color even have a full demonstration, they're being labeled as insurrectionists and dishonorable people, even though their rights have been clearly violated, in the events of murder and so forth. So it just shows you the duality of the justice system and how people are perceived even before they have actively performed within their civil rights. And I don't know how long or how we will be able to change the world's mind and the perception of people of color's activities being their innate right. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that.
Well, Ms. Faulkner, what we saw happening on January the 6th was centrally focused on the things that we're talking about now. So we're talking about this institutional racism, we're talking about systemic racism, all of those things we saw ingrained in the occurrences that are happening on January the 6th. So we also saw a system where we people who are afraid that they are losing power. And we see a growing number of people of color throughout, not only in each one of our states, but throughout the country. And so what do? You fight back and you try to implement violence. And I want to just share one example with you quickly. If we take a look back at what happened with respect to Native American women when there was the determination that all these treaties were going to be written. And so the determination was made that you can never, ever let a woman have a leadership role in the Native American culture, because if you do, then we cannot implement these treaties. Those were parts of it. So how did they keep the Native American women down? It was with consistent domestic violence, which you still see today. And so it's always this violence that's putting it down. And unless we have people who stand up and, as we talked about, say, I'm going to use my white privilege to make things right, or either I'm going to step aside and let the people's will be made, and that there will be equity and justice and hope for everybody. So I just say that to you. That's the only way you can absolutely explain it.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I think people in New Mexico forget is their history. And we've protested for a long time. Cesar Chavez in California. Reyes Lopez Tirina up in the north protested. Dr. King during that time. You know, we have to continue. We have to continue to protest. We have to continue to march. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take up arms, but it means that protesting creates change, and we have to continue creating change, as Dr. King would do.
One last thing I would like to say is that I think if we can bring about effective change a little bit more quicker, if non-minority group people will speak out a little bit more forcefully. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't always have to be a Black person speaking out because there's a Black issue over there. You know, if we're in that mindset and that understanding about what equality and justice is all about here in America, in New Mexico and America, then don't wait for a Black person over there to say, wow, that's kind of wrong. If you know it's wrong, then you're supposed to say something. So I think that non-minority group people can take a position to bring about effective change. And I think that it can help us get further on down the road for equality and justice and proper respect, you know, for everybody.
Thank you. And I know we're nearing the end of our time here together, which has just been, again, such a really very stimulating and inspiring conversation and truthful. And we've learned so much historically as well. But if each of you, I think, Dr. Beatty, that may have been your closing comments there, but if you would each like to make some closing comments now to see us all come to an end on this discussion, which will not be the last, I assure you of that. But to thank you all so much for being here with us, everyone that's on this call, and then our esteemed speakers. But if you would like to offer your closing comments.
Well, you know, I'd like to say, you know, thank you for organizing this, Dr. Sanchez and all the other ones. I think Meg and Ali, you know, thank you very much for pulling this together. And the only thing I like to say is that together we advance. You know, together we advance. And that's the theme of the Albuquerque NAACP. And really, if we just work in concert, you know, and we have clear goals and objectives, you know, we can accomplish anything we want. We can go to the moon and do all those other things. And most certainly we can try to be a little bit more human towards each other. So that's the only thing I would like to say and end with.
Let me, because I know Pamela's got a lot to say, but let me end with this. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be in the company of important people as you all. And the message I have is, let's just keep fighting. Let's just keep Dr. King where he needs to be. Nonviolence is the key. We saw that in January 6th, where violence just disrupted our whole establishment. But we have to keep fighting. And, I think the country's on a good path now. We have a change in regime, and it's going to be important that we continue to think and act the way we should, like human beings. So thank you very much. I also want to recognize Jennifer Gomez Chavez, who is one of our Martin Luther King Foundation. She's been very instrumental in some of the things that we've done in my office. So I want to recognize her. Thank you, Jennifer.
And my closing remarks are very brief, Leonard, is when you are looking for the well-informed, conscientious person, you don't have to search for them very far. Just look in the mirror. And I will just tell you that we need you to be the best that you are every single day. We live in America, and we need to be at our best 365 days of the year. And it's always by looking in that mirror and help us raise our communities.
Thank you for that. And to each of our three just transformative leaders, inspirational discussion today, and for your words of wisdom. And it is, like you said, look in the mirror. This is for each of us to do our part and to have action, right? To take the action that you spoke of today. So many takeaways from today. I really just thank you all so very much, our esteemed speakers, and all of you for joining us and for being part of this movement and this transformation that just really needs to happen. As Pamela was saying in the very beginning, where were we in the 20th century? Where are we now? Well, we don't want this to be the same thing that we're looking at in the next century. So it is the time. Now is the time, and embracing our youth and doing things collectively and as communities, but as individuals as well, is just so critically important. Thank you all, and you just have a wonderful rest of your day. And gracias to everybody who helped put this together as well. Meg, Ali, Dr. Sanchez, Dr. Bailey, Mr. Waits, Ms. Herndon, everybody who came together, Jose Rodriguez, and these beautiful flyers. Thank you so very much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.